Welcome to the Outlap. How we doing, boys?
Doing well. Not the best racing week in the entire world, but there was a lot of racing on this weekend, which I think was nice. A lot of different series are finally getting kicked off right now, which is it's always the best time of the year to look on your YouTube TV and see what's recorded. But yeah, doing well. How about you guys?
Yeah, man, doing well. Love seeing a new set of faces on the podium for a change.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't cheered that hard in an F1 race, I think, since Lewis and Max were going at it on the final lap of Abu Dhabi. I kid you not. I was so hyped. I saw the smoke, and I was like, for one time, are we going to see someone other than, because I think it had been a run of 43 races without a retirement for Max, which kind of we alluded to it a couple podcasts ago. Pretty impressive. And, to have something as mundane as it was end up taking him out is wild. But I was fist bumping for sure.
I love that. So, obviously, for the listener out there, this is a little bit of a different episode. We're shooting the shit a little bit more. So, I want to ask you guys, Mike, what's the hardest you've ever cheered in an F1 race?
Oh, man, hardest I've ever cheered. Honestly, the Max and Lewis Hamilton kind of championship race, when it boiled down, that was probably number one, just because that was I'd say that was still at Red Bull-esque time for me, just because I hadn't hated Max just yet. So again, getting someone to dethrone the champ, who was Lewis at the time, that was something that got me all fired up. So easy one, I think. But Nick, what about you?
Well, I mean, I think when, to be honest, because when I was similar thing, I wasn't necessarily rooting for Red Bull, but I was rooting against Lewis as the incumbent champion. And in that restart at Azerbaijan, when he went locking up and sending it off the side, when Max was already out of the race and he was poised to take a really big jump in the championship and arguably could have locked it up in the grand scheme of things as close as it ended up being. I was so surprised that a driver the caliber of Lewis Hamilton just locked up like that. I knew something happened immediately, and that was when they have the what's called a brake magic button. For listeners that don't know, back in 2021, they still have it on the car, but what it is it's something to warm up the brakes. It disproportionately puts more of the braking bias towards the front tires. Well, he accidentally bumped that on the restart, which made him lock up and go careening off the track, falling out of the points. I cheered pretty hard there because that was just so unexpected. It looked like Lewis was going to just walk away with the victory. I cheered pretty hard there. On another note, the saddest I've ever been, same year, 2021, Sochi, Lando Norris, trying to keep the car on track and being the young lad that he was when he essentially, for the folks that don't know, he decided to make the decision to stay out on track when rain was coming. Everyone else ended up making the right call. He ends up almost putting it in the wall. He ended up getting 8th or 9th, but was really very much poised to win that race. And me as a diehard Lando fan, I was very, very hyped, and it was sad to watch that fall apart in a matter of 5 laps or so.
Yeah, no, that one I remember vividly, of just watching Lando look like a dog on an ice rink, trying to finish the last few laps where everyone just zipped by him. Yeah, that was heartbreaking. Trav, what about you, man? What's the one that we're cheering the hardest at?
So first of all, I just watched both of those races, and in particular the Azerbaijan lockup. I forgot how intense that was in the moment. He had that race wrapped up, and it changed the entire championship. So that was a really cool race. I had no idea about the brake button either. I've never heard of that before. That's a super cool little nugget. I have the hardest I've ever gotten up and cheered was through goes Hamilton at Silverstone last year. I went fucking bananas. He'd been having a really bad year, and he kind of came out of nowhere and overtook those two guys. something about a long, slow corner overtake too just does it for me. That's why I watch F1. It's the coolest thing in the world. You have to have your car in a much better position than everybody else, and he did. And that was great.
Yeah,
I think the other thing that got me up out of my seat though the most was Joe's flip last year.
Dude,
that I was watching that with my family, and that's the first F1 race I've ever gotten my family to sit down and watch with me. And like that happened in the first lap. I literally jumped off the couch and was like, my whole family kind of blew up. It was a crazy moment.
Yeah, for sure. No, Trav, I don't know how many F1 fans would agree with you that slow corner overtakes is their favorite thing about F1, but
yeah.
Party on.
Apparently people like whatever the fuck this was this past weekend with Albert Park being a procession around, like a very candidly cool looking track. Like it's a great look through that park, but like that race, like I'm sure we'll get into that here in a second. That race was very tough for me to watch. It was great to see the McLaren boys up at the top, but just the like 4 DRS zones, that doesn't scream great racing to me. That screams artificial overtakes and processional shit like we saw this past weekend. So sorry to switch to a grumpy mood, but there was some I'm kind of fired up about motorsport this weekend. Like there was some really bad racing on this weekend. We'll get into the IndyCar stuff. The NASCAR race at COTA that was the thing I was excited about all weekend. There was one group of cars that got the setup right, and it's been bad racing all weekend. So I'm a little pissy about this past weekend.
Yeah, well, we are kind of, I guess this is our 2 race update since we missed the last one, but I think some interesting stuff to talk about there. It was again another, let's say, not so exciting racing, few kind of flurries here and there. The K-Mag 10-second overtaking stuff that he did there for the Haas team to put them in the points, and Ollie, you can't get away without saying Ollie Behrman's name there, which I think it's funny. Like Ferrari right now, looking like a solid number 2, right? They're getting rid of the guy who just podiumed for them for the first time in a year and a half. They then also now have a pretty good, he's been in one race, but performed pretty well, young driver that will want a seat. And they're bringing in Lewis Hamilton, who, washed or not, I don't know. We'll see if it's just the car. But man, I just like Ferrari. It's looking good, but they have I think they're putting themselves in a pickle as they start to win more. And who knows if Ollie gets more chance behind the wheel. But
I've had quite a few conversations about that whole Ferrari situation because I think there might be a little element of buyer's remorse that I think could be hitting the Ferrari folks. Yes, they're getting Lewis Hamilton, but they're giving up Carlos, who clearly is a guy that still has it. And, on a slightly different storyline, the fact that he missed that race to have Ollie in his seat, gets his appendix taken out, and comes back the next race to win. I don't know if it's the best long-term move. Yeah, it's the big splash move that, of course is going to sell a lot and make them a lot of money. But is it the best move for Ferrari as the racing team 5 years from now? I'd venture to say no right now, right? Because you've got a guy in Lewis that has 3 years more in him max. Sure, he could be a Fernando and continue to defy the odds and go to his mid-40s, but at the end of the day, you're not building a team around a 38-year-old.
Right.
You just can't do that, and they're putting all their eggs in the Charles basket. But I think it'll be interesting to see after all these guys' careers pan out. Was that the right move? Charles is obviously has the higher peaks, but he has lower valleys too. I'd say Carlos is super, super consistent, and in my mind very well could be that guy that a team builds around, that wins a championship off of being consistent, being there and not making mistakes, not necessarily having that blistering 1-lap pace and putting it on pole every time. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to have a retrospective on that 5-6 years from now, but I feel like that's it'll make them a lot of money, but it is going to hurt the team slightly overall.
What do you guys think is like the upper limit of the age of a driver? Like Alonso, obviously
50. It's at least 50.
You
Alonso,
think?
yeah, he's in great shape. He can drive till he's 50.
Yeah, man, I don't know. I just like
So,
I
the thing
compare
with
it to like
F1
every other
that's
professional
not-
sports.
Exactly.
And like I just compare it to every other like and like yes, in football,
I'd
an
say
old
the
man's gonna get
difference-
snapped in half.
Exactly, right? I think the difference is you can still have old man strength, and that's all you really need to drive a Formula One car, right? Like there's old man strength is a very real thing, and you're going to continue to have that, but they don't have the same sort of like high impact moving things that you can't do later into your 40s, right? Where you really start having to deal with injuries. So I think that 50 is a reasonable thing, but I feel like we're starting to see Lewis maybe fall over the hill and be past his prime a little bit as well. I know you're shaking your head, but it's like
rolling his head here.
It's hard to see. I know that there's an element of there's another level that he unlocks when he's competing for a championship, but the adaptability of a driver is going to be a huge trait. And the last we've seen Lewis dominate is when he had the fastest car by a country mile. George, coming from driving a Williams, which was an absolute shitbox, has the ability to drive a shitbox a lot better than Lewis does right now. And I think a younger Lewis would be doing much better in his situation than he is today.
Okay, I didn't know this is when we were going to do this. We can do this. That's fine.
Gloves are off.
Yeah, we can do this. That's fine. You know what really sucks, Nick? Going to work every day and just knowing that you're not going to be successful. And I can't imagine what a guy who has won 8 championships, excuse me. What a guy who's won 8 championships it thinks about that every single day. Like, would I go into work and if I knew that at best I was going to be the 4th best in the office at what I'm doing, would I go into work raring to go and drive the shit out of the car every day? Of course not. I would move to a different team in Ferrari and enjoy and sandbag and do whatever you can to kind of leave Mercedes right now. So I don't think Lewis is one, and I don't think 50 was a joke about Alonso's article that came out, like his interviews. He's ridiculous. I think a lot of the the thing that determines it in a sport like driving, where focus is the entirety of the sport. I know this is kind of out there, but I think golf is kind of similar in how all you really need to do is lock in and have some concentration. It doesn't really require a ton of physical activity to be really good at. So I really think it relies more on the mental of the driver. And honestly, I did have that thought about Lewis. He could be just not wanting to. Remember we talked about this in the first episode. Part of his Ferrari deal could just be him riding off into the sunset. So who knows? Yeah. But I don't think he's talent wise. I think he's got it if he still has the drive. The dude's gonna drive the shit out of the Ferrari.
Yeah, no, and I could see Hamilton perpetually being Hamilton, right? He's good. It is crazy that George is continuously out qualifying him in most aspects of the race right now.
You know what I am really excited about at Ferrari though is seeing Lewis and Charles, who if Lewis is who Lewis is still. They have really similar driving styles. They're very jumpy. They kind of take risky overtakes pretty regularly and put their cars in spots for people to run into them. It's going to be really interesting seeing two guys who Charles is not there to be a number 2. He wants to win a championship.
Right.
Lewis wants to win a championship. It's going to be really exciting to see 2 great drivers in a fast car for the first time in 7-8 years, right? Pre Mercedes dominance was the last time in the Red Bulls.
Yeah. One of the things I'm excited about Lewis in Ferrari is his swag, the dripped out Ferrari swag.
Yeah,
dude. The guy's always just generally showing up, and I think whether or not Lewis Hamilton has input on Mercedes swag, pretty good across the board. And so just in a classic Ferrari red, I don't know. Is it gonna be streetwear Ferrari?
We're gonna see a huge red puffer vest very shortly in the season. Maybe first race.
That, honestly, I want to see it. That's
yeah. There's an outfit in the future with those big red boots too, for sure. that's making an appearance in a Ferrari outfit.
As far as you guys keep saying 50-year-olds could keep at this, which I think Can they be on the F1 grid? Yes. Can they be competitive? I don't know. Just because, dude, Ollie Behrman was talking about it. Just like dudes like myself who got big watermelon heads, like, what do you think? Strain, is it strain on muscles? Right. I think brake pressure, neck stability. What else? What do you think?
So that's where I was kind of going before. I think that as you get older, those aren't the things you're really going to struggle with as much. I think you're going to be able to keep yourself in physical fitness to be able to manhandle the F1 car. I think there's just an element of your reactions start to go. Like, your reaction time just diminishes over time. It's a known fact. And, like, there gets a point where, you know, as these cars continue to get faster year over year and your reactions get slower, where does it get a point where it's like, I'm driving on the edge of putting it in the wall every time because my reactions can't quite save it and do that quick little opposite lock catch like I used to. That's where I feel like it's really going to go is the mental side, as you were saying, Trav, but physically I think it is just the reactions, just the how fast you can react to the data coming into your brain. Is the limiting factor in my mind.
So speaking of old guys that are potentially going to stay good for a while, what about young guys whose dads own a team and have never been good? What's our thought there, boys?
I am holding out hope that the rumors that he wants to be a tennis pro is real, and he gets the hell off the F1 grid. And we were going to talk about this a little bit, but he ended up putting it in the wall with a pretty lazy mistake last race. He did fine. I saw that was 2 races ago in Saudi. In Australia, he did fine, but it's just like, yeah, he's going against a good driver in Fernando Alonso, but he's 42, 43 years old. And I think you put Lance against any one of the young guys, a Charles, a Lando, even a Carlos, he's getting absolutely throttled, maybe harder than he is being throttled by Fernando today. And it's interesting because he did have success in the junior formulas, but he has seen little to no success in Formula One other than the occasional flash in the pan race that he ends up pretty high up on the podium. Last year really rubbed me wrong. I don't know if you guys remember, he kind of had his whole like spoiled brat moment where he made a mistake and then comes out of the car like shoving his race engineer and shit, and it's just like that's also the stuff that really rubs me the wrong way, where it's just like you can tell that he is acting however the hell he wants to act because daddy owns the team and he gets to do whatever the hell he wants.
I really like his racing style though. I've always enjoyed the way, like, he is not afraid to send it, and he typically has pretty good instinct for overtakes. Like I feel like when he is racing wheel to wheel, he's a really good racer, and it's really fun. But I feel like his mistakes are just like, what are you doing? Like, why did you spin the car there?
Right.
Why did you hit the wall? Like, it's not, you know, he's got some skill. He's a little bit slower than Fernando, but like, dude can drive a car, and it's a shame. He will literally be on the F1 grid as long as he wants to be. Straight up.
I know. And that's
what it really comes down to is he's the epitome of average, right? He's just average. He's never gonna like have that high of a peak. His valleys are like moderately low, but like pace average, performance average. And when you have had a dad shoveling millions and millions and millions of dollars into your racing career and you have done nothing but lose to teammates, I mean, at what point does, you know, he's not the sole owner of Aston Martin, so at what point does that external pressure start to become enough that, you know, Lawrence actually starts to think about sacking his son? I'd love to see it, though. I've never been a Lance Stroll fan if it wasn't clear enough.
No, me neither. I always think about this related to F1, right? So I think, like, baseball was changed when it kind of was, like, it became a global thing, right? We picked up a handful of folks out of the Caribbean and things like that, and the whole game of baseball changed. And, like, the barrier to entry to playing that game has always been relatively low, right? It's like ball, bat, glove. And even there's, you know, stories of folks playing with, like, you know, cardboard, right? Whatever it is. F1 is so cost prohibitive. Racing in general is so cost prohibitive to get in there. I always wonder, and I know sim racing is kind of balancing the playing field a little bit, but like, at what, like, the average that we see on the grid, if this was open to the masses, how much extra if it wasn't, if someone could just jump in a car, the average Joe could jump in a car and race. Do you think we'd see like a drastic improvement over time, or do you still think that these guys are like the best of the best, or are these the guys the best that have access to money best?
No, I think you're spot on with the second part. It's always kind of been that, like, F1 has a history of paid drivers and supporting teams, so like I think it's necessary. But to your point, like if the scape of NASCAR, F1 keeps changing and like more and more like external money comes into the sport, like could paid drivers go away? Like we could be seeing an end of an era. Who's the real quick trivia for you guys? Who's the other paid driver on the grid?
So Lance Stroll's like a pseudo paid driver, but I'm pretty sure it's Zhou Guan Yu.
No, it is Logan Sargent is a paid driver as well.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the
how he kept
there?
his seat. I mean,
dude, he's honestly one of the hardest people to find information on that I've ever looked up. I'm not kidding at all. His I think his dad is a big oil guy, and okay. I remember when it first came out that he was getting a seat, I was real excited because like American driver in the series, obviously I love Williams too. Like that's a perfect allegiance switch for me, and I literally could not find anything on him.
But like when he got that Williams seat, there was a lot of other options that made a lot more sense. But it makes sense that he ended up with the seat because he's coming with money, saying, "Hey, I will give you money to drive this car."
Yeah, I think it's money, and I think it's like deep rooted,
right?
Yeah,
yeah. But like that's even worse. So one, that was in his contract that Albon could take his car. But two, that just is even crazier to me that that's in the contract and he's paying money to drive for them, right? Like that's nuts. You're muted, Mike.
Something worth mentioning. I think we got to back up a little bit. For those who missed the Australian Grand Prix and they only saw one Williams car on the grid, Albon crashed in qualifying. Williams didn't. Yeah, sorry, FP1. They didn't have enough parts to put his car back together.
Yes, you can't have a spare car. Back in the day, you used to be able to have an entire spare car because of cost limits. You can't have a spare car now, but every other team on the grid has a spare chassis in parts in the back of the garage for exactly this instance, just in case something goes catastrophically wrong. They can rebuild a car, and we've seen it done a number of times across the grid over the last 3 or 4 years.
Right. Well, Williams couldn't. And so Albon literally took Logan Sargent's car. Logan Sargent got to watch the race. And Albon got to race, which is a crazy thing. So, that's what Nick was talking about there with Logan Sargent. Not only paying to play, but also paying to watch, I guess. Maybe the most expensive ticket for the race in Australia. What do we think?
Might have been. So I want to touch on first just Williams as an organization. I think it is pretty sad, to be honest, that they're in this situation. And I don't know if you guys remember the first season of Drive to Survive. They hardly got a car to testing. They were late to testing. So this is not something where this is a first-time incident and James Vowles needs to come in and fix it. Their excuse was, they're running it off of old systems. Well, it's always been done that way. That's not an excuse, and it's an embarrassment of Formula One team. The rumors are that they're not even going to have a second car for the next race. They don't even have enough parts to build a car for the next race, which I think is in 2 or 3 weeks' time. So
that's nuts.
It's an embarrassment that they're in. The Williams organization has historically been good. Unfortunately, ever since I've been a fan, they have not been. And they have the money, right? They have the investment of capital. It's not a money issue. It's just they are not a good Formula One team, which is clear as day. And it just then again, what comes in my mind is that Cadillac and Andretti entry. You've got a team that knows how to run race cars across a number of different series. I can guarantee that nothing like that would ever happen under that roof, right? And
I think You said it's not the money. It is the money. It's not that they don't have access to the capital, right? Like that's not the problem. But because of the cost caps being put in, they don't have the ability to spend money like the other teams do on the stuff that the other teams have already spent money on, right? Like the software that they use, or the steering wheel with like the actual screen on it, or a proper wind tunnel, or like all those little things that add up. They have the money. They just can't access it because of the cost cap. So, when the cost cap started a year or two ago, I really thought about this a lot, and like I liked it. I did not like it at first because of this, but I think over the next 4 or 5 years, like we're going to see a slow injection of capital into that team, and they'll continue to get better because I really do think that the PE group and James Vowles, like both of them, are very very highly thought of, and I think they're headed in the right direction, which is very encouraging.
Speaking of teams, I guess coming into Formula One and taking more and more of kind of a front row seat, Audi with Kick Sauber.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that for sure. Had some notes on that last time, but essentially, Audi originally had only bought 50% of the team. They decided to double that investment, buy the whole team, and essentially move up the timeline of that investment as well. So instead of them kind of fully coming in 2026, they're going to be fully coming in 2025 and have a lot more impact there. Andreas Seidel, who was the team principal at McLaren, who then went over to this Sauber organization with connections to Audi. So, this was kind of the plan all along. This was kind of him sounding the alarm bells, like, we need more investment and we need it now if you want this Formula One team under the name of Audi to be even remotely successful and competitive. I think it's good news. Same team, different story, but holy crap, do they need to figure out how to do a pit stop. Lord.
Brutal.
Especially both cars. Like, it's multiple weeks in a row, but then this race, it's both cars are having pit stop issues. It's I've never seen anything like it in Formula One.
Yeah, no, they were talking about that, and like just the single like lug that was like rolling across. They were like bringing out like extra lugs and all kinds of crazy stuff trying to do that because apparently they knew it's like a known issue that they have with the wheels, which is crazy.
Like what are we? It's 2024. Yeah, it's 2024, right? Like what are we still doing? Having wheel nuts that don't work in F1, and like Williams not having a spare chassis. It's honestly, these are the kind of things that when I first started learning about F1 and history of F1, like these little quirky stories, like really kind of drove me to learning more about the sport. So may it continue forever, regardless of the money that's in it.
Well, that's the crazy thing. I think like, for any modern day sports fan, to imagine like NFL like not having turf or missing a field goal post just sounds crazy. And I'm sure in like the original forming, there was probably crazy stories like that. But yeah, F1, here we are, $100 million worth of cars plus driving around in circles, and they're still having issues with that stuff.
You bringing up like a field goal post made me think about how it's on both ends, right? It's the teams not showing up ready to play, but it's also like we've had plenty of issues with tracks and Formula One introducing tracks like Las Vegas last year being so rushed and the practices being a wash. It is crazy. Like Formula One is not a risk-adverse sport for many ways, but I think they definitely roll the dice the most in terms of things like that, of like putting on an event that maybe shouldn't have been put on when it was put on, and they're gonna send it anyways. So it's kind of it's funny to think about it like that, how bad even Formula One is at their own game sometimes too.
No, absolutely. What I wanted to talk about, Mr. Resident McLaren man. How do we think? How do we think about the Australian Grand Prix? Obviously, Piastri at his home race asked to give up a place. Lando seemingly extended that with like that being the right call, but like, yeah, talk to me, McLaren man. I give him the place back. Get the Aussie back on the podium. Let's get a shoey again.
I think that there was a really good chance. So this is probably a good point. Just do a quick race recap for anyone that didn't watch the race last weekend. Start of the race, lap 1. Max takes the lead into turn 1. About halfway through the lap, his wheel starts smoking. Brake ends up lighting on fire. He pits at the end of lap 1, maybe at the end of lap 2. Ultimately retires from the race.
Down
Wide
with
open.
the Dutchman.
Wide open. We didn't have to hear the Dutch national anthem at the end of the race for the first time in a long time. Opened up the strategy, and there was no sort of safety car intervention, but ultimately ended up becoming a 2-stop, and it became a battle between Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, and Lando Norris at the top of the field. Oscar Piastri ended up in 4th, but as Mike was alluding to, in the middle of the race, there was a point in which he was ahead of Lando. Lando had better tires, newer tires, and ended up the team asked him to let the place go. I think that ultimately, that's just for some context. Finally, Carlos Sainz ended up winning, and Lando almost tracked down Charles for P2.
The smoothest operator, taking P1. Love it.
So on the McLaren note, though, I mean, love to see it, especially compared, these first races of last year were so abysmal that looking where we were 12 months ago, nothing to complain about. And I think in terms of this season, we kind of solidified ourselves as that third fastest team, and might have the chance to pick up a win. I was really hoping that there was going to be a safety car intervention in last week's race, and see a battle between those top 3. Unfortunately, it never materialized, but it was good to see McLaren. I think, like I said, we solidified ourselves as the third fastest team. Lando made that decision a no-brainer, to where you're not going to hear any bitching from Piastri when he is 10 seconds behind his teammate. That was clearly the right call. And if the team didn't intervene, it was going to happen anyways, and then you risk ruining both their races. So though it's a home race and all that, Oscar still knows that he said it in interviews, he knows he's still got some stuff to learn, especially when it comes to race pace. Like, Lando's just is better, has more experience of managing the tires and having more pace over a long stint. I venture to say again, I think it's between us and Ferrari for the strongest driver combinations on the grid. I think Oscar has really just continued to impress me, and he will just continue to get better here as he's in year 2.
Yeah, for sure. And your boy Zach Brown getting his contract extension, so you're going to see more of him.
Which is just good for the continuity of the team. Obviously, if you've got big switches going on, that's never a good sign. We're trending in the right direction, and we're doubling down on what we've been doing. So,
yeah, no, he's been killing it.
Championship in the new reg of cars?
I don't know. Well, I'll tell you what, Zach Brown's been doing a great job, nabbing sponsorships. I think a majority of his sponsorships are at least big sponsors, are all American companies, which is interesting. And he keeps stealing sponsorships from other teams, which is, I guess the name of the game. But Trav, sad day for our Mercedes boys. Lewis with a DNF with a mechanical issue, and then Russell. How are we feeling?
Yeah, I mean, that's never going to be a Mercedes track. I don't think it doesn't suit their car. It also doesn't suit when cars explode, so that's bad.
Yeah.
That was a pretty wild one. Up shift, boom, just everything silent. It's like, well, he knew what happened.
Yeah, I don't have high hopes for the season. I don't think that there's a difference between a slow car and a car that's relatively fast but unexciting. Their car is just not very exciting. It clearly doesn't have the edge. It's not fun to watch. So I feel like you can watch the Aston or even the Williams sometimes really performs well in certain sectors. Mercedes is not performing well across all sectors, so it's not great. You know what else is not great? Your boy, Daniel Ricciardo, Mike.
Oh, dude, I know.
I read an article this morning about a potential Red Bull source saying that if he doesn't perform in the next 2 weeks, Liam Lawson is in, which, dude, I like Ricciardo. He's a nice guy. Give me Liam Lawson. I want Liam Lawson.
No.
100%. And, so on that note, though, as hard as they were on Nick DeVries last year, it's only right to have, arguably hold Daniel Ricciardo to a higher standard. And, they sacked Nick DeVries, who was probably, I would say, maybe a little bit closer to Yuki Tsunoda through 3 races than Daniel Ricciardo is right now. you didn't hire Daniel Ricciardo to develop him in a second team, right? So as much as it hurts, everyone likes Daniel Ricciardo. Like, he's a great dude. He's a guy that will forever be remembered for leaving Red Bull when he shouldn't have. And that's very unfortunate to say.
Yuki is also putting in a sneaky great season this year. Mm-hmm. He like, car aside, dude, like, he's in the top 3 to 4 drivers on the grid for me this year. He's been fantastic.
Yeah, and
he's made that step that I was looking for the last few years. I'm finally seeing it from him too.
Yeah, he still needs his dive bomb on Danny after the team call was tough, but it is what it is. The man needs to chill. I'm not a Yuki fan, never will be, I don't think, unless he can prove me, I guess, right, wrong, who knows. But anyways, yeah, it'll be sad to see Danny out of a car again if he doesn't pull it together. Honestly, I just don't know what it is about the guy. It's like, I don't know if he just lost confidence, if it's one of those things where, like, he kind of was chasing being a number 1. He got the opportunity to be a number 1, and he's like, wait a second, maybe I'm a number 2. I don't know. It's sad to see. Love the man. I think the whole world in F1 loves the man, but yeah, I just want to see him to be competitive. And if he's not, this sport is the top of motorsports, and so there's always someone looking to take a seat, and there's always someone who needs a seat. So that'll be a sad day if old Danny Rick gets the hook there.
But still, like I said, he's an 8-time race winner. You can't. It would be sad, but it's just, in my mind, if he continues to get beat by Yuki Tsunoda the way he has been, it's like, it's business. It's business at some point. They were grooming him to come into Red Bull, and if he's not going to beat Yuki Tsunoda, that's never going to happen, so they might as well wash their hands of it and move on.
For sure.
What do you guys think of, did Alonso brake check Russell at the end?
Yes, dude. 100%. Not a doubt in my mind. And then me and Nick were talking about this, and he was like, oh, no, like, Alonso's not a guy to do that, blah, blah, blah. It's like,
he's 100% the guy to do that.
Yes,
he's the first guy I picked.
So, yeah. Hold on, Nick. I told this man, I was like, this man is the man of scandals. He loves a scandal, and if he's going to do anything a little suspect, yeah, it's going to be that guy to do it. And he was getting caught. He was for sure going to get passed, and then at least, lets up in the corner.
So
hold on.
The reason why I wouldn't expect it from him is he is normally a feisty racer, but he doesn't necessarily do egregious moves on track. He's more of an off-track, egregious move kind of guy, right? So that was why, like
Crash
in
gate.
his wheel-to-wheel battles, he, Crashgate, right? That's more off-track shit. I mean, like, he doesn't like, Max when he was coming up, got the kind of persona of, you can't go wheel to wheel or you're going to end up wrecking. No one has ever said that about Fernando Alonso. That's what really surprised me about that. He's a very good wheel to wheel racer, and he's never going to be trying to endanger himself or another Formula One driver on the grid. That's why my instant reaction was I didn't think that was on purpose. Watching like the brake trace and stuff, like, it was weird. And also watching more of the onboard, he was having an issue. It wasn't bullshit that he wasn't having an issue. It's one of those things where I truly feel as if it was something like the car was giving him issues, and yes, he might have been trying to slow down and keep George behind him, but he definitely is not trying to wreck George out.
No. That was a loss of downforce that led him to, like, skip into the gravel track and then like ultimately roll over. But, like, it's just one of those things. It's like, you just don't do it, I think. But I guess that's for the FIA to figure out, and they gave him the 20-second penalty. And
they talked about it on the broadcast. It was actually funny, the similarities to Singapore of last year. Max not winning the race, Sergio going to win, and George binning it on the last lap as well. Finishing the race when he would have been in the points.
Listen, as I grow my hair out and channeling my inner George Russell, the man loves to crash late in a race. Right when you think things are going to be like, a little exciting to finish, he makes it a little bit more exciting. But
he's got a little bit of Stroll in him, as much as I hate to admit it.
Yeah, at times. Yeah, he does, for sure. Okay, coming up next, we got the Chinese Grand Prix. Haven't seen it on the race calendar since 2019. Honestly,
We'll have a hot
don't know what
lap
to
vid
expect.
coming out.
Yeah, don't know what to expect here. What are we thinking, boys?
Yeah,
What's the
Nick.
track known for? Like tire deg? Like what is it known for?
So
Temperatures?
I
have no
haven't
idea.
watched
Honestly, no
many
clue.
races around China. I've seen some highlights and stuff like that. I've driven it a fair bit. It's a quirky track. It's a very quirky track. There's this one really, really weird section in Sector 1 where essentially you're turning right for almost 360 degrees. So it's a really, really wide turn that then tightens up, and turns into a hairpin. So it's a really weird corner, and it's very, very hard to drive in a Formula One car because you're turning and braking the whole time. So that, I'd say, is probably what it is known for the most. It does have a very, very long pit straight as well. The start-finish straight is really long, but it's most known for that quirky, very, very tight sector. It was designed, I think it was supposed to be designed to kind of look like the yin and yang. So if you look at the top-down view of the track, that sector kind of looks like that. Very tricky to drive. I think the other funny thing about China is I believe Lewis Hamilton put it into the wall trying to enter the pits and threw a race away, I believe. And then I think Sebastian Vettel made kind of a crazy overtake in the pit lane because it was when the track was new and the driver in front of him really didn't maximize the pit limits and slowed down way too early. So he actually made a pass going into the pit lane, which is something that's just not seen super often. Overall, not a lot of racing has really been done at China, though. There's been quite a few years missed, and it was only really brought on the calendar in the mid-2010s. So,
Yeah, looks like there was like 04 to 2010, 2016, and then in and out. But yeah, Daniel Ricciardo looks like he got a
God, you beat me
back in
to it. I was
2018.
about to hit you with some trivia, man. Who's the only?
My bad.
I was gonna say the Chinese Grand Prix. It's got some great winners. There is only one non-World Drivers' Championship winner that's ever won there, and it's Daniel Ricciardo in 2018.
There you go. Sorry, Trav, stealing your thunder. No,
probably
interesting
his
one.
last win, might have been his last win for Red Bull? His last win was with McLaren, but it might have been one of his last wins with Red Bull. It was either there or it was... No, Monaco was pretty early in the season.
Yeah, I was going to say the Monaco win. I think that one might have got it, but who knows. Anyways. No, should be exciting. Trav, what else, man? Out of the F1 sphere.
Yeah, I got one thing I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Do you guys know what the Thermal Club is?
Not a clue.
Not a clue.
So the IndyCar series did a non-points race this past weekend at a place called the Thermal Club. The Thermal Club, as they called it on the broadcast, is what Augusta National is to racing. Essentially, some dude, entrepreneur, took $90 million and built a private racing club in the middle of the Coachella Valley in the middle of nowhere. It's a $5 million plus initiation fee. You have to buy a villa that lines the track to
Talk
have...
about the dream. Holy shit.
Oh, yeah. You got to be... there's 70 villas. You have to buy a villa in order to be a member of the track. They have air-conditioned storage for all of the cars. They have tennis courts. They have everything that a country club would have. Think like Big Sky, Montana, killer country club. It's amazing. And should it exist? Maybe not. But it does. It's cool. So they did a race this weekend that essentially, spoilers, not good. It was really bad. But it's essentially took all of the things that are bad about F1, like the weird guys flexing their money and just the kind of the weird pageantry around racing that isn't historic at all. They're just trying to create this, and they did a really weird format too. They did a 2-heat qualifying race, and then they did a 20-lap race that was split up in the middle, and the drivers had to pit in the middle of the 10 laps. It was really, really dumb. And I've been wanting to talk about IndyCar for a while. You guys know I'm a big IndyCar fan. I honestly I'm like straight 50-50 on which series I like better, IndyCar or F1. I think the main kind of like we can get into the tech differences if we want to. Nick, I'm sure you probably dig into that a little bit, but in terms of this series, the main difference you're going to see is like it doesn't have the big overtake that is like a 10 out of 10 overtake. They have a lot of really, really great wheel-to-wheel racing. The pit strategies are just as interesting, and they have fuel. So like there's an added bonus of strategy. Honestly, most of the time, the races are more exciting because of the wheel-to-wheel racing and the strategy. So IndyCar is in a super strong spot right now, and I really hope that what happened this past weekend is not a trend of where IndyCar is going, because it was for $1 million. The race winner got $1 million, but like it was just like IndyCar is a wheel banging, red blood American racing series, and it's awesome because of that. It's way more dangerous, and I really hope they don't go towards the F1 route.
Yeah, and just to touch on the differences between IndyCar and Formula, I know we might have touched on it a couple podcasts ago, but IndyCar is a spec racer series. All of the chassis are built by Dallara, and the teams will have, there's a few different engine providers on the grid. And is it all the same tires, Trav? They all have the same tires now, right? There's no different tire providers. So
yep, all the same tires. And just before you get into that, like for people who don't watch it, they literally look exactly the same. Without looking closely, like you'd say, oh, that's the same thing.
Yeah,
right.
And so the biggest difference with Formula One is it's just a blank set of regulations saying this is what certain things have to be, and you can't do these certain things, and then it is left up to the teams to design the Formula One cars. And that's why there is so much more variance in the levels of performance in F1 cars versus Indy cars. There is still that level of incumbent better teams. But in IndyCar, it really comes down more into how to set up the car for the weekend, how to maximize the strategy. There's not necessarily any direct components that is going to give one team or driver an advantage over another. It comes down to driver skill, and it comes down to team skill, which is something that I think isn't necessarily – it happens in Formula One, but not to the same degree, because no matter how much team skill you got, you're not putting a Williams in P3, right? It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of individual driver skill, and something really cool, like I think the cars are really cool too. Like they have no power steering, which I think is probably the biggest difference from a driver's perspective. It's insane. They run longer races too, compared to F1.
They don't have near the levels of adjustments, and then especially with the hybrid power units. I don't think they have any hybrid in IndyCar at all. So
pure gas, baby.
Yeah, so you with Formula One cars, you get a lot more things you can adjust internally in terms of the diff, in terms of the brake balance. You can still do a lot of that stuff, but not to the same degree of a Formula One car. And then I would say the other biggest difference of the driver is energy, right? And being able to have that overtake button, have different driving modes and different levels of deployment. The cars drive similar, but the Formula One car is going to be a lot more finicky, I'd say. Like you have to, it's just inherently a slightly harder car to drive. It's got a little bit.
It's a lot grippier,
and it's got more
it's finicky.
Yeah,
it's finicky because it's grippier, and like if you watch the Indy cars, like they bounce and slide around a lot, and like we could get down the long road of, well, this is because IndyCar goes to shitty street circuits a lot, which is one of the downsides of IndyCar, but it is really fun to watch. So two of my favorite things about the series that I like over F1. Number one is the way that they deploy their overtake energy. So they get an allotted amount of time of what is called push to pass that gives them essentially the same stuff that DRS does. So it's just an addition. It doesn't open. I think it's actually a boost in the engine, maybe cooling. But they can press the button anytime they want. There's no wing that opens. There's no designated zones. When they want to use it, they can use it. So they can use it to defend, and they can use it to overtake as well. So what you'll see a lot of times during the race is kind of at the crucial moments during a tire strategy, you'll see the drivers really using their push to pass there, trying to get overtaken positions before their tires burn out or when another driver is coming in on cold tires. So that's really cool. Love the way that they do that as compared to DRS. And then the other thing I love is oval racing. Oval racing is not for everyone, and I think you have to watch a lot of it to get into it. But the best overtakes in IndyCar by a mile are on ovals, because there's something about going 250 miles an hour in a straight line and cutting somebody off in front of them that's the only time that you see as breathtaking of overtakes as you do in F1 is on the large super speedway ovals with IndyCars. It's fantastic.
Just nothing more American than no hybrid, faster than any other racing series in wheel-to-wheel racing, a little bit more dangerous, and driving in circles. Gotta love IndyCar. IndyCar. Does IndyCar have any like terrible names like Kick Sauber or RB Visa, Red Bull car with wheels?
There's a lot of old Southern dudes with team names. So there's Penske. There's there's a couple others where it's just like old white dude names, and that's the team.
Dale Coyne Racing,
Chip Ganassi Racing. There are a couple. I'm gonna look it up while you guys talk.
Yeah, no, all good. Yeah, Dreyer, Rainbow Racing, Cusick Motorsports. It's a lot. It's a lot going on. One thing that I'll say, which was pretty crazy, I didn't know this. I obviously haven't been following NASCAR since I was back in Tennessee. I didn't realize that Denny Hamlin is a driver for a team and then owns a team with Michael Jordan and has his other drivers that he competes against, but he's financially invested in them, which, like, I get it. Like, instead of the commentator career, he's like, screw it, I want a team. And Michael Jordan was like, hey, who would have known Michael Jordan wants to get into racing? Crazy, though. What a wild world where it's like, yes, I sell a widget, but I also own a company that also sells widgets, and I directly compete with them. No conflict of interest here. I'm definitely not going to put it into the wall to benefit myself or anyone else.
I don't do it to beat the team that I own. I do it for the love of it, right? That's really all he's doing for it. Because he's won championships and stuff like that, too. I've actually got a signed Denny Hamlin car down in the basement. It'll be worth some money someday as long as he stays out of drama. I know he got in some drama a little bit ago. But
Denny loves some drama.
He actually straight up said that if Bubba Wallace was like on the last lap of a race and it was like for playoff contention or not, like he would get out of the way. Like he cares more about his team because of what you just mentioned. He's been doing it for a long time. Although I do think
he's got his shit. He's just doing it because he likes driving cars, right? Like
going fast.
That's the kind of thing that we talked about. Like, you guys played baseball at a higher level than I did. I called it quits a little bit earlier, but it's like afterwards, if you got told you could, compete at the highest level and like not really have to do that well, like we just want you there, it's be like, I'm in. I'll go, like Mike, you're like, I'll go throw a few innings. Like hell yeah, right? So it's like, from that perspective, and it's the same thing kind of going back to like Fernando Alonso. He's probably going to drive as long as Formula One teams are willing to have it. Like,
yeah,
there's few 100%. Experiences that I'm sure can rival driving a Formula One car.
That's one of the things I love about other racing series, other than F1 as well, is the driver's affinity to drive in other racing series. Like, the poor dude, it's so awesome watching Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson hop in. Like, Kyle Busch races Craftsman Truck Series every week. Every week he races Craftsman Truck Series.
Cool. No,
it's amazing.
Yeah,
Kyle Larson does the midgets and late models on dirt tracks like relatively often. These guys are not afraid to go get in other cars and try something. And Kyle Larson is actually in the Indy 500 this year, which I'm very excited to see. He's driving for Hendrick Motorsports, which will be pretty cool.
And for all you Drive to Survive fans that remember the Roman Grosjean crash, that the Man of Fire, he's driving an Indy car.
We don't claim that. We do not claim Roman Grosjean in an Indy car. He's there. It's not because he's not American. That's not what I'm getting at.
I've always kind of liked
driver.
me some Roman, and he has had probably 4 or 5 opportunities over the last 3 years that he's been in IndyCar to win a race, and whether it be by his own fault of his own, or by his fault of his own or not, he ends up pissing away the chance to win, and it is
Got that
quite
Haas in his
hilarious.
blood, baby.
The worst one was a couple years ago it was last year at St. Pete. He was pretty much locked in, ready to win, and got put in the tire barrier by a guy coming out of the pits trying to make a dive bomb down the inside. So me personally, it's funny to hear you say you don't like Romain Grosjean. I've always kind of liked him. I never thought he was like a super crazy top tier driver. But I thought he had a chance to do pretty good in IndyCar, and he was always just kind of okay. And anytime he really got a chance, he squandered it, unfortunately.
Yeah, he just wrecks a lot, and I'm not into that. I probably pull for Pato O'Ward is probably my favorite driver. I really like his style. He's a fantastic driver. I love Colton Herta too. They both just are on the very edge of the tires at all times, which is a blast.
For anyone wanting to see one of the most impressive bits of driving I've ever seen, look up Colton Herta drift, and you'll see what I'm talking about. He went for the lead of a race. Ass end got out on him, went the other way, and he just kept the foot in, just maximizing points in the outside clip. Those are drift terms, by the way. But that was some of the most impressive driving I've ever seen. And I know you know what I'm talking about, Trav, but he is quite literally driving an Indy car at that angle, going forwards. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's not like it does. Those cars have about 10 times more horsepower than a drift car, so to keep it on the road is absolutely
and no
bananas.
steering lock. And that's the biggest thing too, is you don't have the steering lock to be able to really save it, and he saved the shit out of it.
He did. It's a real bummer that Andretti's not getting into motorsport or F1 a little bit earlier than they are, because I really would like to see somebody like Herta get a shot at an F1 seat. And I really think after that was kind of shut down with the super license points stuff a few years ago, maybe last year, I think Andretti was his last chance. So it's great to see him in IndyCar. Like, we need really talented drivers like Colton Herta and Pato O'Ward in IndyCar, but if you tell me, kind of back to your point of like who's in F1 and like how they get there, if you tell me that there's 10 drivers in the world better than Alex Palou right now, you're out of your mind. He is so freaking good and would kill it in an F1 car.
Love it, boys. Love it. Did anyone watch Gunter Steiner's interviews at the end of the race?
No, I'm over him. He's jumped the shark.
He's very German. I will say
that.
Man. He had some opportunities to crack some jokes. Like that is funny, and then Carlos Sainz cracks his own joke about the appendix, because like, announcer, perfect time, be like, looks like you had a few tenths that came off, with getting the appendix removed, and Carlos Sainz has to make the joke himself. Come on, Gunter.
Yeah,
no, I mean. No. It was an awkward interview, though, overall. Like, not his forte. He's got some.
Probably plays really well with. Yeah, probably plays really well. Just deadpan with the German audience, maybe just generally having no fun. But, anyways, all right, boys.
As we wrap it up here, keep an eye out for the pre-race episode leading into China. We'll try and release that the week before. As well as a hot lap vid. Only thing I wanted to touch on is I did a hot lap for Australia, and pole. So I put a 1:17.9 down as a hot lap. Pole last year was a 1:16.7. Puts me in about like the upper 20% of all laps in Formula One. So.
Not to toot your own horn, but call yourself Miles Davis.
We gotta keep track. Nah, gotta keep track though.
No, hey, listen, you're way better than me on that thing. I think the next evolution of the hot lap though is we're gonna feed you 3 spicy wings, have you run 3 laps, and then 3 more spicy wings, and then 3 more laps, and see how the heating up Nick Scott's internals gets results in hot laps. But anyways, for everyone listening, thanks for joining, boys. Another good one in the books. And folks, that's the Outlap. getting you up to speed on all things motorsports.
Toodaloo.